Let's just get the result out of the way first. It all ended in a silence so complete you could hear the traffic from the highway, half a mile away. It was the sound of an entire family's worldview collapsing right next to a barbecue grill. My Uncle Bob, the man who had spent a decade publicly diagnosing my failures, was just staring at the ground. His face, usually red and loud, had gone a pale, chalky gray. My cousin Derek, the lawyer, had his mouth hanging open, looking like he'd just been cross-examined by a ghost. The annual Let's Shame Miguel show was over. It was permanently, finally canceled. And all it took was one sentence from a stranger. To understand why this was an explosion, you have to understand the ritual. This wasn't a family reunion. It was a performance. It was success theater, held every year at the same park. I knew the script by heart. My cousins would arrive in their newest cars, the Porsches and the absurdly large trucks. They'd talk loudly about promotions, about investment portfolios, about their vacation homes. My aunts would compare their children's achievements like they were trading stocks. And my role was to be the family's greatest disappointment. I always played my part. I pulled into the parking lot in my 10-year-old Honda Civic. I wore my old jeans and a shirt that had seen better days. I grabbed the cooler of sandwiches. Simple turkey and cheese. Nothing fancy. My knuckles were white on the cooler handle. I felt that familiar sour knot forming in my stomach. It was the taste of cheap beer, sunscreen, and public humiliation. I was walking toward my own execution, and I was even bringing the sandwiches. The conversations quieted when I approached. This wasn't respect. This was the audience settling in. The opening act was over. The headliner, "What is Wrong with Miguel?" was about to begin. Uncle Bob, my father's older brother and the self-appointed patriarch, stepped forward. He was a man who owned a small construction company and mistook his moderate income for a massive empire. He never missed a chance to remind everyone how he'd made something of himself. Well, he announced, his voice booming across the picnic tables. Look who decided to grace us with his presence. It is our little Miguel. He pulled me into a bone-crushing handshake, his eyes grinning but cold. This is the first lesson I need to tell you. People who are the loudest about their own success are often the most terrified of their own mediocrity. My Uncle Sonny needed me to be a failure. It was the only way his small company made him feel like a king. Still living in that tiny apartment, Miguel? He asked. Still working at that clinic. Making what, $40,000 a year? Living paycheck to paycheck. The family formed a loose circle. They were anticipating the routine. They'd heard all the jokes before, but they never got old. This is the part where I made my critical mistake. For 10 years, I let them. I told myself I was above it. I told myself their opinions didn't matter, that their definition of success was shallow. But that was a lie. The truth is, I was a coward. I was afraid of this exact conflict. It was just swayed easier to let them think I was a clerk at some dead-end clinic. It was easier to play the part of the failure than to fight for the reality of my success. I wasn't just quiet, I was complicit. I was actively handing them the stones to throw at me. So I just stood there. I said, "I'm comfortable with my choices, Uncle Bob." Comfortable. He roared, like I'd confessed to a crime. He pointed at me, using a half-eaten chicken leg like a gavel. Comfortable is the enemy of success. You are 32 years old, Miguel. Most men your age have built something. He gestured at Derek. Look at Derek. His own law practice. A house in Westfield. My cousin Sophia beamed. She'd started a small marketing business. She was respectable. I was the cautionary tale. My Aunt Carmen gave me that look. The one usually reserved for a sick dog. Some people are just wired differently, she sighed. Not everyone has the drive. The pity. That was always worse than the scorn. You're stuck in a dead-end situation. Uncle Bob concluded. He was right. I was. But the dead end wasn't my job. It was this picnic table. They heard clinic. They pictured a small sad office with beige walls. They didn't picture a level 1 trauma center. They didn't picture the place where helicopters land all night. They heard tiny apartment and they thought poverty. They didn't think a surgeon on an 80-hour work week who just needs a place to collapse 6 blocks from the hospital. They heard old car and thought failure. They didn't think a man paying off $200,000 in student loans. They never once asked me, Swani, what I did. Not a single question. They just assumed, and I, the coward, let them. That is when I saw her car. It was a black sedan. Expensive, but understated. It wasn't flashy like Derek's Porsche. It was the kind of car driven by people who have nothing to prove. It parked near my Honda. I recognized the driver. Patricia Hendris. My heart didn't leap. It sank. Hendris was the chief of surgery. She was director of the trauma residency program. She was my mentor. She was, in short, one of the most respected trauma surgeons in the country. And she was walking right toward my family reunion. This wasn't a rescue. This was an accidental detonation. Uncle Bob was still talking. What Miguel needs, he announced, is a reality check. Hendris stepped right into the circle. Bob Martinez. She asked. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his speech like a scalpel. Uncle Bob, oblivious, puffed up his chest. He saw an attractive, successful woman. That is right. Bob Martinez, Martinez Construction. We built the new surgical wing at. I know, she said. I came here looking for Ditar. Martinez. The silence. That is the result I told you about. That is the sound I wanted you to hear. It was total. Dr. Martinez. Uncle Bob repeated. His confident smile was frozen. It was starting to crack. Hendris looked right at me. Dr. Miguel Martinez, chief resident in trauma surgery at Metropolitan General. I apologize for interrupting. We have a multi-car accident coming in. I need our best trauma surgeon available. I watched my uncle's face. It went from proud to confused to a pale, chalky gray. Chief. Resident. He whispered. Hendris wasn't done. She was just warming up. Though not for much longer, she continued, still looking at me. Miguel's board certification is next month. Once he passes, which he will, he is joining our attending staff as a full trauma surgeon. The family was stone. Derek's mouth was wide open. Aunt Carmen looked like I'd grown a second head. Dr. Martinez has been my top resident for 3 years, Doctor. Hendris said. She wasn't bragging. She was stating facts. Exceptional surgical skills. Natural leadership. The board approved his attending position last month. Attending position. Uncle Bob's voice was barely a squeak. Starting salary is $385,000 annually, she said, as casually as if she were reading a grocery list. Plus surgical bonuses, research stipends, and profit sharing. It should work out to around $450,000 his first year. $450,000. That number just hung in the air. It was a physical force. It sucked all the oxygen out of the park. It wasn't just a salary, it was an invalidation of their entire belief system. The system that said Porsches and construction companies were success. My old Honda in that moment just became the most practical car in the lot. It was the car of a man who values his time, not his image. Mr. Martinez, she said, turning to Uncle Bob. I hope you understand how proud you should be of your nephew. He is one of the most promising surgeons I've worked with in 25 years. And then she left. She just walked back to her car. They stared at me. You're a trauma surgeon. Derek finally stammered. Yes, I said. But the apartment, Aunt Carmen said, grasping. The car. I have $200,000 in student loans, I explained. I live modestly to pay them off. I'm planning to start a free clinic once they're gone. A free clinic. Uncle Bob repeated. The words made no sense to him. Why? Derek asked. You could make millions in private practice. Because saving lives is more important than accumulating wealth, I said. That was the second bomb. It challenged everything they valued. "Why didn't you tell us?" my cousin Sophia asked. Her voice was small, confused. "And that is the part I want you to remember. I finally told them the absolute truth. Because you never asked. In 10 years, not one of you ever asked what kind of work I did. You assumed. I tried to tell you once, 3 years ago." Uncle Bob laughed and said watching operations on TV didn't count as medical training. I never tried again. My phone buzzed. "The hospital." "I have to go," I said. "People are depending on me." "Go," Uncle Bob said. "Go save lives." As I walked to my car, I could hear them whispering. "A surgeon. 450,000. He let us think. Here is the warning for you. Watch out for the Uncle Bobs in your life. The people who need you to be small so they can feel big. They aren't just critics, they are anchors. They will drown you in their own insecurities. But here's the more important lesson. The one about me. My mistake was letting their narrative become my reality. I chose silence because I was afraid of their judgment. Don't do this. Don't shrink yourself to fit into their tiny little boxes. If people in your life, especially your family, consistently make assumptions about you without asking you a single question, they are not your family. They are your audience. And they are just waiting for you to fail. You don't need a chief of surgery to show up and detonate your life. Your truth is enough. Your life, lived honestly, is the only validation you need. Stop letting people who have never walked a mile in your shoes tell you that you're on the wrong road. That night, after 6 hours of surgery, I had 43 text messages. But only one mattered. It was from Uncle Bob. "Miguel, I spent years talking about building something meaningful. Today I learned you've been doing it all along. I was too blind to see it. I'm proud of you." I smiled. Apologies are nice. But respect is better. And I had finally earned it. Not by arguing, but by living.